Thick clouds of swirling mist clung to the treetops as the newcomer, Eleanor, ascended the winding path leading to the ancient fortress. The castle, perched high on the rocky outcrop, appeared almost ghostly in the dim afternoon light. Local lore spoke of hidden rooms, unsolved mysteries, and 1,000 whispered stories that settled on its thick stone walls like old dust. Eleanor, arriving that very morning from a city known more for skyscrapers than medieval towers, had taken only moments to sense the difference in atmosphere here. The air felt laden with history, each breath tasting of centuries past. Yet, for all the legends around this fortress, she was told that one person knew it best. The castle's resident historian, a warm but somewhat reserved man named Eleanor, had been directed to meet Adrian at the castle's main bailey, just through a tall arched gateway studded with worn iron bolts. The squeak of the heavy gate gave way to a broad courtyard, strewn with remnants of old flags and statues that bore the scars of time and weather. She spotted him standing by a large fountain chiseled from granite. Adrian wore a comfortably rumpled jacket, patched in places with leather at the elbows, and clutched a tattered notebook. He had the look of someone who had never strayed far from these walls, his posture almost blending in with the fortress's timeless stance. He greeted her with a small, warm smile. "Good afternoon," he said, offering a polite incline of his head. "You must be Eleanor. I hear you've come to learn about our castle's remarkable secrets." "Yes," she replied, returning his smile with one of her own. "I live for stories of hidden passageways and half-forgotten tales, and I couldn't think of a better guide than yourself, if what the villagers say is true." Adrian's cheeks reddened slightly, either from the cool breeze or an unexpected shyness at her compliment. "I'll do my best to show you what few have seen," he said. His voice, though quiet, held a resonance that drew her in. "Shall we begin where all good stories start?" With that, he lifted one hand, gesturing toward a modest side door set into the granite wall. They stepped inside to discover a wide corridor, where the pungent smell of aged wood and ancient mortar filled the air. Their footsteps echoed across the stone floor. Torches mounted on the walls gave only a flickering illumination, revealing tapestries with threadbare spots. Adrian paused at each tapestry to point out details in the embroidered figures. A knight on horseback, a comely maiden, their gazes locked, as though only a single moment in time mattered. Eleanor noticed how Adrian's own gaze sometimes lingered on her, quickly darting away when she tried to meet it. Something about his presence awakened a gentle flutter within her, an unexpected tug at her heart. "This corridor was once part of the Grand Hall," Adrian explained, his voice almost reverent. "Centuries ago, travelers and nobles made this their gathering place. They'd feast and make merry by torchlight." Eleanor touched the rough texture of the wall. "It's as though I can still hear the music and laughter. The walls seem full of voices." Adrian nodded, his eyes alight. "I often imagine the same. For me, these halls are alive. They breathe stories into me as much as I pore over my old archives." They continued until the corridor opened into a vast chamber. Rows of stone columns rose to meet a vaulted ceiling that soared overhead. Through the high windows, beams of waning sunlight streamed in, striking motes of dust that shimmered gently. This was the castle's chapel, with remnants of carved angels in the corners and a single row of pews that led to a diet. Adrian's voice grew hushed. "Legend claims this was built by a devout baron in the 15th century. He insisted the entire castle revolve around faith." Eleanor stepped forward. "It's stunning." She ran her fingers over a column's relief, noticing the intricate vines that spiraled around cherubic faces. "Even in disrepair, there's a powerful serenity." Adrian gently directed her attention to a shallow alcove near the altar. "If you stand just there and speak, you can hear your voice echo back, as though it's traveling across time." She moved into the alcove, turned toward Adrian, and softly said, "Can you hear me?" Her words resonated in gentle waves, carrying throughout the chapel. Adrian shut his eyes briefly, perhaps absorbing the echo. When he opened them, his gaze was intense, filled with something Eleanor could not quite decipher. "Yes," he answered. "It's as though you're speaking directly into my ears." Eleanor gave a small laugh, diffusing a moment that felt oddly charged. "That is remarkable. Almost like the castle is alive, echoing us back." He ushered her toward a smaller door on the opposite side of the chapel. "It doesn't end here," he told her. "Come, there is more to see." They climbed a spiraling tower staircase that seemed to tighten with every turn. Adrian explained its place in the fortress's defensive structure. The design minimized the advantage of attackers, he said. Only one or two could climb at a time, making it easier to defend. The memory of ancient battles flickered in Eleanor's mind, conjured by the passion with which Adrian described it. Once they emerged into the tower's top chamber, they found a circular room with narrow, arrow-slit windows that overlooked the moors. The valley below was a rolling patchwork of farmland and dark wooded groves. The sky remained overcast, rendering the land in subdued greens and grays, save for a thin sliver of gold on the horizon. This was the watchtower, Adrian said, a place of vigilance day and night. Eleanor turned a slow circle. "I can imagine the lookouts searching the horizon for signs of approaching armies or caravans. But it must have been lonely, too." She paused, gazing through one of the slits. "Standing guard while the world carries on below." Adrian let silence act as his agreement. Then, gently, he tapped the side of his notebook. "I've spent half my life exploring every stairwell, crevice, and corner of this fortress, yet something always feels undiscovered. A corner of the past that hasn't been illuminated." She glanced at him, her curiosity piqued. "Have you found secrets that others never have?" He replied with a slow nod. "Yes, a few. But there's one I've yet to unravel. For years, I've heard rumors about a hidden passage that leads to a sealed library. It's said to be filled with rare manuscripts and personal diaries from the castle's earliest inhabitants, but I've never laid eyes on it." "Have you tried searching?" she asked, brushing her hair from her eyes as the wind from one of the windows stirred it. "Many times," he admitted, a note of wistfulness in his tone. "But the clue to the passage's whereabouts was lost to time. I keep digging through old documents, praying I'll stumble upon a clue." He paused, then looked at her with a sudden spark. "Would you like to join me on a hunt of sorts?" She beamed. "Absolutely. I'd love to help you find it." They exited the tower, descending broad steps that opened into a different corridor. The aroma of stone and damp earth grew stronger here. No torches were lit, so Adrian produced a small lantern from a sconce. Flickering light peeled back the darkness, revealing a path that felt seldom traveled. Their footsteps were careful yet determined, and Eleanor couldn't help noticing how her own heartbeat quickened in tandem. At the far end, they came upon a heavy oak door that creaked open under Adrian's persistent push. Inside was a modest records room. Ancient scrolls lay in neat, if somewhat dusty, rows. Shelves of ledgers and leather-bound tomes lined the walls, while a single wooden table stood at the center, covered in maps. Adrian set the lantern on the table, illuminating the dusty surfaces with a warm glow. "This is where I spend my days," Adrian said as he ran his finger gently along a row of documents, leaving a faint streak in the dust. "It's not glamorous. But for me, it's as alive as the Great Hall once was." He offered Eleanor a seat at one end of the table while he settled across from her. They spent the next hour poring over carefully folded manuscripts. Adrian's calm voice recited lines of archaic English, which he deftly translated. She found herself increasingly enthralled, not just by the hunt for the rumored library, but by Adrian's quiet fervor, the way his eyes lit up at each new page. When she read something particularly interesting, he would lean closer, until she felt the warmth of him near her shoulder, the soft hush of his breath. They discovered a reference to a bookroom in a text referencing the old baron. He prized knowledge above all else. Adrian murmured, reading from the fragile parchment. These lines suggest he built a private study in a walled off section of the keep. Eleanor bit her lip in excitement. That could be it, the library we're searching for. Adrian set the parchment down, carefully rolling it up. We should check the keep's foundation, he said. If there's an extra chamber, it might show up on the architecture plans. They moved to another shelf, rummaging carefully. Their search turned up old sketches of the castle's expansions over 2 centuries. Adrian unfurled a parchment that rendered the fortress in detailed cross-sections. He paused at one portion, eyes widening. Look here. He tapped a small rectangular area that seemed unlabeled, wedged between 2 known rooms in the keep. A hidden chamber, Eleanor whispered, leaning in to see. Let's find it. Armed with the map and a surge of adrenaline, they slipped back into the corridors, retracing their steps. The keep sat in the heart of the castle, a massive bastion of stone rising in layers. They entered the first floor, following the plan's instructions. Adrian guided them to an unremarkable corridor with a small window at one end. I've walked this hallway 100 times, he said, scanning the walls, but never noticed anything unusual. Eleanor looked from the map to the hallway, sizing up the distance. Finally, she pointed to a portion of the wall. Here, this section is thicker on the plan than it appears in reality. As if guided by instinct, Adrian pressed gently on the carved blocks. One block shifted slightly, a faint grind of stone on stone. Then, with a gentle push, part of the wall swung inward, revealing an opening scarcely wide enough to slip through. Breathless, they entered a passage cloaked in pitch-black darkness. Adrian held his lantern high, illuminating a narrow, winding corridor lined with musty stones, as though the place had been sealed for centuries. Spiderwebs glistened in the lamplight. The air felt cooler, damp, laced with an otherworldly hush. Eleanor's heart pounded. They carefully stepped forward, the corridor leading them around a bend to an iron-bound wooden door. Rust coated the hinges, and the handle looked as though it might break off if handled too roughly. Adrian tried it gently. At first it refused. He gave it a second, sturdier push, and a loud screech of protest crackled through the silent passageway. Then the door yielded. The lantern's glow revealed a room brimming with books, floor-to-ceiling shelves on every wall, thick bundles of parchment stacked on tables, and ancient charts rolled in corners. The smell was overwhelmingly of old leather, paper, and dust. Eleanor inhaled deeply, astonished. This is it, Adrian breathed, his eyes gleaming, the old baron's hidden library. Together they inched inside, pivoting slowly to absorb the riches. It was a relic of knowledge from centuries gone by, seemingly untouched. Leather spines of every shade, gold embossing glinting faintly in the lantern light. Some books were so large and weighty that they required stands. Others were small, carefully bound diaries, set aside as though awaiting a reader curious enough to open them. Eleanor let her hand hover over the volumes, respectful of their fragility. It's a treasure trove, she whispered. Think of the stories locked away here. Adrian stood at her side, gently lifting one of the diaries. Its cracked cover threatened to tear at the spine. He carefully opened it. On the first page, a sweeping script named it as the Journal of Lady Beatrice, the Baron's daughter. His voice trembled with excitement as he silently skimmed the opening lines. He glanced up, meeting Eleanor's fascinated stare. She wrote about her daily life here, about a suitor her father disapproved of. My goodness, this is priceless, both historically and personally. Cautiously, Eleanor turned in a circle, her eyes drifting from the ceiling's wooden beams down to the tapestry of knowledge before her. Adrian, you've finally found it. He set the diary aside, his gaze deeply intent upon her. We found it, he said. I couldn't have done it without your help. She felt a flush of warmth color her cheeks. You've been searching so long, I just pushed a stone in the wall? He shook his head. No. You did more than that. He paused, swallowing. I've lived so much of my life among these walls, you see. It can become isolating. But something about having you here, working side by side, made everything feel new. More than that, it made me realize how I've been hiding, not just from the world, but from my own heart. The air thickened with a tangible hush. Eleanor couldn't tear her eyes away from him. The faint lantern light bathed his features in gold, and there was vulnerability in his expression. He was no longer just the reserved historian, he was a man offering her a glimpse of his heart. I'm not entirely sure what I'm feeling right now, she admitted softly. But there's something about this place that seems to draw us closer. Or maybe it's just that discovery secrets revealed, both in these books and within ourselves. He gently lifted a hand to brush back a stray strand of hair from her cheek. Though the movement was small, it kindled an intimacy that left her breathless. She leaned into his touch, almost without meaning to, and felt her heart begin to race. Through the quiet, the only sound was the faint flicker of the lamp. Adrian let his hand fall, but not before briefly tracing her jawline with his fingertips. We must be careful, he said, almost to himself. Like these books, hearts can be fragile. Before she could answer, he cleared his throat, returning his attention to the illuminated diaries. Look, there's so much here, Eleanor. We can restore it, share it with historians across the country, or keep it as one of the castle's secrets. Despite the heady swirl of emotions, she focused on the task at hand. Carefully, the two began to survey the contents, setting aside items that looked most in need of preservation. Every once in a while, their eyes met, and an unspoken warmth passed between them. In one corner of the library, Eleanor discovered a small chest. Its metal latch showed signs of heavy rust, but at her gentle tug, it cracked open, revealing rolled parchment. She stretched one out, reading the delicate script. It was a love letter, penned by Lady Beatrice's secret suitor. The letter spoke of longing, of nightly vigils beneath the tower, waiting for a single glimpse of candlelight from her window. Eleanor handed it to Adrian. It's just as you said, she murmured. The diaries, the letters, all capturing the depth of someone's heart from centuries ago. Adrian's fingers tightened on the parchment, eyes scanning its lines. It's beautiful. Such devotion, despite the barriers. He closed his eyes, inhaling softly, before opening them to meet her gaze. I can't help but wonder, are we reading this at the exact moment we needed to? She felt a quiver inside. Maybe so. There's this sense of fate here. He nodded, setting the letter aside gently. I think destiny moves in these walls. It's shaped my entire life. They lingered in the library, hours slipping by unnoticed. They documented promising titles and made notes in Adrian's battered notebook. When the lantern began to sputter, they reluctantly concluded that they had to leave. With great care, they closed the iron-bound door behind them, making certain to memorize the location of the hidden entrance. Once back in the corridor, Eleanor realized the day had long since faded into evening. The stone walls felt cooler, the air carrying a damp chill. She rubbed her arms. Adrian instantly shrugged off his jacket and draped it around her shoulders, a tender gesture that stirred a mellow tension in her chest. Thank you, she said, reveling in the unexpected warmth and faint scent of him that clung to the fabric. Let's go, he murmured. I'll see you back to your lodging. Tomorrow there's more to explore. The next day, she returned early, eager to uncover more secrets, but also yearning to see Adrian again. She found him in the records room, the once dusty table now covered in neatly stacked documents from the hidden library. He looked up with a smile that chased away the shadows. Together, they continued their research, diving deeper into diaries, letters, and the venerable volume. Amid the musty pages, they shared slow, meaningful conversations. Adrian spoke of his childhood fascination with the castle. She offered tales of her city life, detailing how she'd always felt like a restless soul, searching for something intangible. As the hours glided by, Their hands would occasionally brush in passing. She could feel an unspoken bond forming, like a book waiting to be written. Much of the day was spent sorting fragile documents, carefully placing them into archival boxes. In between tasks, they would pause and read aloud passages that struck them for their poetry or heartbreak or nostalgia. The unhurried dance of reading and listening, discovering and sharing, served as the backdrop to the blossoming awareness between them. Long after midday, they decided to walk the ramparts, seeking fresh air. The sky had cleared, revealing a brilliant stretch of blue. The warmth of the sun on ancient stone provided a gentle comfort. Pausing above the courtyard, they both gazed down at the fountain where they had first met. I remember standing there, waiting for you, Adrian said softly, leaning on the parapet. I felt an inexplicable nervousness. Guiding tourists, visitors, even researchers is part of my work. But there was something about you. I felt it instantly. Eleanor smiled, feeling her heart quicken at the admission. She didn't need to rely on the trembling diaries or letters to sense what was blossoming here. I felt it too, she confessed. From the way you looked at me, I sense, I don't know, like I'd arrived at the right place in time. His hand found hers on the cool stone, and their fingers intertwined. The moment was as unassuming as it was monumental. Beneath them, the courtyard bustled with a few visitors wandering under the bright sun, but it was as though the entire world had shrunk to this stretch of weathered battlement. Adrian turned to face her. I don't want this to end when you go, he said, his voice quivering with genuine apprehension. She squeezed his hand gently. I don't plan on leaving soon. And even if I did, nothing's keeping me from coming back. They stood in silence for a while longer, absorbing the sensation of being close. Then, as if urged by an invisible prompt, Adrian leaned in. His lips brushed hers with a careful gentleness, as though confirming a suspicion. She inhaled, her breath catching, then returned the kiss, her fingers curling into the lapels of his jacket. Time slowed as they savored that first delicate melding of souls, accompanied by the hush of a breeze that played in the centuries-old towers around them. When they finally broke apart, they did so with soft laughter, as though momentarily giddy with discovery. That was, Adrian began, a little breathless. It felt like unearthing the last missing volume in a library. Eleanor's face lit with a smile, tears teasing at the corners of her eyes. I feel the same. Like we opened a secret passage in ourselves. Their romance continued to unfold in the days that followed, each moment spent together painting new details on the tapestry of their intertwined stories. They documented and cataloged the newly discovered library, saving centuries of history from obscurity. In the evenings, they would roam the moonlit gardens and talk for hours, recounting their dream, forging plans for how to share the castle's treasures with the world without losing its soul. Each step of every corridor gained new significance. The Baron's old diaries, Lady Beatrice's letters, and the hidden library itself echoed a timeless message that love, once recognized, wasn't easily hidden away. Like the faithful suitor's nightly vigil, or the fortress that endured centuries of storms, their affection felt resilient, capable of overcoming the haze of daily life. One late afternoon, after they had carefully sealed the most fragile scrolls into protective cases, they found themselves drawn to the chapel. Setting aside their work, they slipped into the vaulted hall. Echoes of their footsteps on the stone floor carried into the stillness. Adrian guided her to the alcove where she had once tested the echo. She stepped in and whispered the words that filled her heart. Adrian, I think I'm falling in love with you. He stood outside the alcove, hearing her voice amplified by stone. The gentle echo repeated her confession, carrying it back in multiple layers, as though the centuries themselves were bestowing their blessing. Adrian walked toward her, eyes glistening as he took her hands. You know, he said, pressing his palms to hers, I never thought the castle would reveal such secrets, and certainly never imagined it would reveal me to myself. She smiled, leaning her forehead against his. Perhaps we found each other when we were both ready to share our truths. He closed his eyes briefly, feeling the tide of emotion flow between them, remembering the many lonely hours he'd spent exploring these dim corridors before her arrival. There, among the weathered stone and hidden passages, they had uncovered more than a lost library. They had each discovered a new chapter in their lives. In the ensuing weeks, as their romance deepened, they resolved to open portions of the hidden library to scholars under strict preservation guidelines. Adrian would continue as caretaker and historian, balancing public interest with respect for the relics. Eleanor planned to stay, at least for several months, to help document the trove and write her own record of their discovery, one that included more than just the library's significance, but the powerful shift in her own heart. They were seated one evening by that now familiar fountain, a hush settling over the courtyard. Overhead, the first stars emerged, bright against a velvet sky. Adrian gently wrapped an arm around Eleanor's waist. She tilted her head onto his shoulder, exhaling contentedly. "You mentioned in the records," she said softly, "that the Baron built this castle not just as a fortress, but as a testament to his dreams. He wanted a place where knowledge and faith intertwined." Adrian nodded. "Yes, at its foundation, it was meant to be a sanctuary for discovery, a symbol of hope in turbulent times." She gazed up at him, the reflection of starlight in her eyes. "I believe it still is that, for us, a place of discovery, of the castle's past and of what's in our hearts." He touched her cheek, smiling that gentle, slightly shy smile she had come to adore. "We'll keep rediscovering it together." In the distance, the castle's walls stood silent, their aged stones warming under the gentle glow of torches and moonlight. Somewhere within, that hidden library awaited their continued exploration. Whatever secrets it held were no longer looming, unattainable whispers. The threads of history and human connection had converged, weaving a new tapestry of love and shared purpose. They listened to the trickling fountain water and felt the evening breeze ripple through their hair. Tomorrow, there would be more pages to flip, more diaries to decipher, and more of their hearts to share. And, in the quiet hush of the centuries' old courtyard, they understood that the true revelation wasn't just in the lost library, but in the bond they had forged, a hidden chamber of the heart finally illuminated.